worthwhileness of maturing love versus the first flushes of butterflies, lustful instincts, hormones on overdrive, and all of that stuff, which actually begins everything, but does not continue. And the place of maturing bodies, maturing sex, age, memories, and weariness. Sounds grim. It's actually very rewarding. So
that was our dog groaning in agreement in the background.
The dog, sorry, that's Joy the Labrador.
That wasn't
She's just
Nigel.
here on the floor. Groaning in agreement. And Nigel, I'm going to start with you because Louise and I can get a bit too chatty.
You can.
Thanks. Let's talk about, you're in your 60s.
The only one in my 60s.
Early 60s.
Early, very early 60s.
Early 60s.
Early 60s. And talk to me about the different ages of marriage.
Ooh, wow.
How many do you think there are?
Well, I think that, I don't know how many there are, but there are certainly different phases of marriage. I was thinking about a couple of them as we've worked through this. And even with memories, we got married. We were, 22 and, we met when we were 22 and 17. You were 21 when we got married and I was 26 and all of the drama of that.
Yeah.
And the next year, we were talking about memories in one of them. We have a memory we go back to and laugh and go, that's great. All I have to say is the word Mallorca. Because it was, some people talk about their honeymoon was, but we were going away on honeymoon exhausted and leaving all our friends behind in Ireland. Whereas Mallorca was our first holiday together a year after we got married, more or less.
That's a lovely Spanish island for those of you wondering what that word is.
Yes, it's one of the Spanish islands. Thank you, David. And we just had a wonderful marriage, wonderful holiday in a wonderful marriage on that island. No kids, no nothing. It was 1 year of marriage. It was exciting. It was
Early
fun.
days.
And so that's one of our great memories in our marriage. And, I can say Mallorca and Louise will go, or vice versa.
Sorry, what was wrong with the honeymoon?
Nothing.
It was great.
It was grand. But, we'd had weeks of wedding prep.
Yeah.
We had, for us, people had flown in from all around the world.
But honeymoons are often very disappointing.
Absolutely.
I mean, our honeymoon was fine. It was good, but it was 2 weeks away. My mother had
Him with us? No, I didn't. Sorry to my late mother-in-law.
I thought you hadn't noticed, Nigel. But it's funny, it's advice you're given. My mother said, make sure you spend on your honeymoon. Make sure you have a good honeymoon. So we kind of obeyed and we got a great honeymoon in an island off Africa in the Canaries and 2 weeks. And honestly, as a young couple, it was too long. And we had a good time because it was fine, but really we wanted to be back with our mates and our friends and, chewing the cud and
back at the house we just bought.
Back at the house that we
married couples did that in those days.
Yes, we owned a house, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of pressure, particularly if you haven't ever had sex before. You're in a whole new world.
Yeah.
So sometimes actually to be in somewhere that is more familiar is a better idea than trying to deal with sunburn.
Yes, I know we're talking about maturing love and not honeymoon.
Yeah, but if that was the first flush.
But that was one of those things in that first year. But for us then, by the time the second year was around, Stephanie, our oldest, was born in that following summer, the second year of our marriage, if you like.
Yeah.
And then you're into the world of young children for us for 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is, because that is all the ups and downs of family, the challenge of family life.
Yeah, but we were young, so it's the spring. It's the
absolutely. We were young. We were in our 20s, 30s. We were able to handle it. You're trying to balance careers and all that sort of thing. So that's a whole phase. You asked about the phases of life. Then you come. I think dealing with teenage children is a whole phase of life all of its own.
Yes.
And how you deal with all of that.
Yeah.
And then you're into this interesting thing of the empty nest, which for our generation, actually wasn't an empty nest because our kids are millennials.
The boomerang
so they're the
generation.
boomerang generation. So they go and you think they're gone and then they're back again. And certainly for our 2 girls, they're gone and they're back again. And we're delighted they're back again. But our son went and really never came back.
He never came back.
He's now married with 2 children, another on the way. So he's into that whole cycle now.
Yeah.
But, and I say that because one of the dynamics you have to deal with in marriage is you're in your own home, but for a season, you've 2 adults also living with you who are part of your family, but they're adults.
Yes.
That's
And
another
that
phase.
is a real challenging time, I think, that you have to navigate as parents, but
Yes.
for adults. And I would say that. And then you're into the whole world of emptiness completely, and you're going, where are they all? I mean, Louise has this great phrase that we're in the car, and she's saying, oh, I long for the days when I'd buy 3 babies strapped into car seats in the back. And I'm going, no, thank you very much.
You know that feeling.
But-
Control and security.
You do. I think you do long for that.
Yeah.
You do long for that kind of the maybe slightly rose-tinted glasses.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But it was the
It is, of
simplicity
course.
of it.
But
the,
there's a
the
certain
beauty
part
of it.
And then you're into a whole new world for a season. This can be either a long or short season, depending on how. So we're living it right now, where we really, our kids think we're teenagers, and we really do what we want because actually we're not. They're not at home anymore.
Yeah.
Actually, we don't have a home anymore just at the moment. But
We're not in employment in that sense.
We're
Yeah,
not.
and we're
There's
not
all
tied.
that freedom for a season, and then of course you will get a lot older, and you won't have it again. I'm sure. Haven't got there yet. So for every one of those, there's dynamics related to each other, to sex. There's related to finances. There's related to health. Health is a big one as you get older. All of those bring different dynamics to the marriage, and you need to have help with that. You need to have advice, and you need to work it through yourself. Just finishing with this, I always remember around the 20-year mark, I had a friend who was a good bit older than me, but he was a close friend. And I remember him saying to me around that sort of time, Nigel, 20 years is the hard time to get through marriage because you almost have to reinvent yourself. If you've had the norms of children in the first couple of years of marriage, they're now into their late teens, whatever, you almost have to reinvent the marriage. And that was an interesting thing to at least wrestle with. Whether we actually reinvented it, I'm not sure. But each time you're going through something, you're having to deal with the challenges that brings. And so that's maturing love.
And the ability to change and adapt is fundamental in order to mature well.
And I'm going to push some questions around this, but the concept of using memories. I mean, you did it beautifully there. All you had to do was Mallorca, and you were back in And as we talked about in the first episode, which was the Good Foundations episode of what do I love about you and what works, I think there is in maturing love an add-on to that of we are using memory to secure the connection in quite dramatic changes of health and age and aging bodies and changing nests, empty nests and all of that. And not that you want to kind of soporifically switch yourself off just in reminiscent mode the whole time. Oh, do you remember when? Do you remember when? Do you remember when? But the importance of memory to secure the joy of longevity.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because with the thing about memory, it's not to be nostalgic. But I mean, biblically, memory is really important. God tells us to remember. He talks about memorial stones. It's you create a memory and you build something and it's registered in you. I mean, even the communion feast, it's all about remembering. Remembering is really important. And I mean, if you wanted to, and here's a challenge, if you want to change a dynamic around your dinner table, talk about the memories that you enjoyed together. You start laughing, because what it does, it reconnects you with something. It has to be a positive, good memory. Of course, that's why he said Mallorca. And immediately I smiled, because it connects me with freedom. It connects me with adventure, excitement. And if you remember rightly, Nigel, that particular memory, just to plunder that memory, we had somebody had visited our house and dropped curry on our sitting room carpet, which was a stain that couldn't be removed. So we claimed on our insurance. And then when the insurance money came through, we said, let's go on holidays.
Oh, dear.
And put up with the
We sold the house a year later.
We sold the house.
Still with a stain on the carpet.
On the carpet. It wasn't our problem after that.
We sold the house within months.
We did.
But there was something that was like, there was a bit of adventure, a bit of doing, so that it stimulates a whole lot of things in me.
And Emma, this will be really important for you, and you'll understand this. Right on the beach in Mallorca, there was a McDonald's.
Oh yes, there was. Look at his face.
We had many lunches in McDonald's.
No, we didn't. It was
and the ice cream.
creams.
They had just introduced ice cream.
But here's the thing.
I cannot stand McDonald's.
What memory, Father forgive her, she does not know what she says. But what memory does, it stimulates something in us that we're obviously thankful for, but then it creates the hunger in us for another interaction, another connection, sets us up for that. And that's why it's not about just being nostalgic. So in maturing love, remembering those things, we actually like to talk about how we felt about one another when we first met. I don't know whether you two do that, but we talk about that. We say some fairly outrageous things. In fact, I invent things about him that really weren't true, but it's just
I know
for
that feeling. Yes.
For the fun of it.
Yes.
But what it does...
Half the people out there have heard stories about me that I don't think are actually accurate at all. About
now, look,
we
we all know Emma never exaggerates. But you see, what it does is it turns on our relational circuits. It turns on our anticipation of
it does
the continuance and the growth.
And let's get quite practical about this. What David and I have done over every birthday, and
so that's 2 birthdays a year, yours and mine,
and wedding anniversary,
and we do a little bit.
Christmas, New Year.
Yeah.
And we ask each other
4 times a year.
We ask each other for highlights of the year, personally, relationally, ministerially, because our work is ministry. And it's a funny thing, in fact, because right now in filming this, it's not long after my birthday. And in some senses, the year that we had, or 2024, would be one I go, not sure I would want a relive of that. As good as the pain produces, perseverance, etc., etc. But actually, when we sat down, do you remember when? And we talked about our holiday and swimming in very clear water, and we talked about some memories over the children, and who are all adults, but not married yet. I know you've got married one, we don't yet. And suddenly,
no, but we did have a marriage in the year. We had your dad.
Oh, my dad!
We married your father.
That's true. We did. We talked about that.
So we remembered that,
and welcome Maureen, and all of that kind of thing that is diarized memory.
Yes.
And we make ourselves do it. So that I don't even remember one of those moments, a birthday or an anniversary or a year end, when we didn't do that. It's
we always have done. Yeah.
We always have done. And it promotes this. You hold it where you don't allow it to go, and this went wrong. It's the highlights.
Yeah.
It's the, oh my goodness, we did this and we did this and we published this book. And do you remember we
published 2 books this year?
Published 2 books this year.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
okay.
so we did.
This year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and then it makes you feel very different about each other, and you are gluing together a maturing love that has so much history that you have chosen to celebrate. And what I cannot stand is the concept of her indoors, or my husband, or my wife, or anything that is negatively spoken over years as a comedic act.
The ball and chain is a phrase that we have in the UK. The ball and chain.
Cannot stand it, because it robs the wellness of maturing love to mock or to poke fun at pastiches of marriage, stereotypes of marriage that destroy maturing love.
I think the other thing we do at those periods of thankfulness is we also we look forwards.
Yeah.
And our thing that we talk about is, what one thing would you be gutted if it didn't happen in the next year? And what we're sort of doing in that, and I come from a marketing background, so we're always looking at what's our core purpose or our vision, our values, what's our slogan for the year. And you're kind of almost setting that on a yearly basis, or maybe more times in a year. What is, and that's not a work-based thing. That's us as a, what are we doing? Say on your anniversary, what do we as a couple want next with God? What's our next God adventure? That could be a small thing. It doesn't have to be a very ambitious thing. But over time, you're always setting goals as a couple, as a family, as people who love Jesus. What next do we want to see God work through our lives? So you're keeping that going year on year on year. And it will, as you look back and celebrate what's gone back, you'll see, actually, God has increased us and taken us on a journey.
It accumulates. So, Nigel, weariness, aging bodies, we all have them. Let's talk about how the body changes what you want to do and what you can do.
It's a very real thing. And I think we were primarily talking about it in the work context, to be honest with you, that as you get older, and I have turned into my 60s, and for any of the men out there who haven't done that yet, you do find this real change in your very late 50s into your 60s. I remember my late father-in-law, who died when he was 61, talking to me about, it was one of those shocks in life. And he talked to me about it, and he was saying he was an Anglican minister, and he said, I could sometimes do 3 or 4 funerals in my 50s without even thinking about it in 1 week. And then he said, because in the parish world, you're burying people you don't barely even know sometimes. Yeah. But he said, as I turned 59, 60, I found every funeral was an emotional thing. And I didn't really understand at the time. I was probably in my very early 40s or something like that. But now I understand that as I get older, I don't have the energy that I used to have. And particularly in ministry life.
Yes.
I would say that particularly, that what I did when I was running church and planting churches and doing all those things in my 40s and into my early 50s, I find I don't have the same energy for. Now, I have a long history and reputation for the 20-minute snooze after lunch. I've been doing that since I was 20.
You do.
I do.
It shocked me the first time I saw you do it, that you were like, literally, I'm going to sleep. I've eaten my power nap. Like in church.
Like a light.
Literally, I watched you sat down in a seat and you went to sleep, and I'm like, but we're all sitting watching you.
It's a great skill.
And anyone who knows me knows I can go out like a light. But 20 minutes later, I'm fine. And I still do that. I still have to do that. But just you find that on every level as you get older. And you've got to moderate yourself to be able to handle that and manage yourself in that. And then things hit you. So for me, I was diagnosed with some diabetes at some stage in my 50s, and some other things. You find some of the joints aren't quite as flexible as they used to be, and whatever. So, you are handling all of those things, and both in the context of work, in the context of home, and in the context of the intimacy of a marriage as well.
Yes, I think we do need to talk about mature intimacy or mature sex, and go there in the fact that there is a sense of the aging body is slower to respond. There's no doubt about that. And what was thought and quickly achieved is a different journey of that is slower, that is more thoughtful, actually is more rewarding, but we don't tell each other that. And we have this story told by the filmmakers of the day, because I think there's not the respect for maturing love. So you get told that it has to be fast, furious, and a sense of immediacy that doesn't match an aging body. And we miss the joy in the lingering and the fact that things don't always work in the way that they used to work when you're 20. And that's not failure, that you figure out how you touch, think, talk that is stimulating in different ways, that it leads to culmination in physical intimacy. But what I want to say in that is, it is better than the lustful fury of your 20s or even your 30s. I think there is a difference. If I say about 45 onwards would be my kind of point, particularly because women's bodies change at about that point. Aging is not like that. Aging is along and then there's a jump.
Yes.
And then along, and then there's another jump. And we certainly, even friends of mine who work within the plastic surgery business talk even about skin and what it does, because they work in that sector, and just even the collagen and all of those functions. Like, you're talking about joints, I'm talking about collagen in terms of wrinkles, you're talking about collagen in terms of joints. But the notice of, I suddenly spiked in my aging, and then I plateaued a wee bit, and then I spiked again, very well known scientifically. And the sense that at those age spikes, we sit and we go, oh, this is different. And that's good, not bad.
Yes, yes. And there is a lie and a myth out there that all the fun happens when you're young.
Oh, nonsense.
It is an utter, complete nonsense. Totally is. There is something wonderful about having the history together and enjoying growing older together, maturing together. I mean, maturing is a great word, isn't it?
Yes.
And actually, you become a little more outrageous as you get older because you care less about what other people think. Therefore, you can risk a few other things. Your mind is more developed. You're less. I'm going to say.
I'm just being aware that our children might even watch this, Lou.
Oh, well, there you go. That's fine. I've no problem with that whatsoever. Some of the open conversations we've had with them have been delightful. But people
For us,
should.
not for them.
We like to shock them from time to time. But we need to get a hunger for the beauty of growing older and maturing love. Strength to strength, glory to glory. Although outward we may be
wasting away.
Inwardly, we're being renewed day by day. And I do think that as our bodies start to fail us a little bit and somewhat, we enjoy who we are. We're more comfortable in our
Very
skin.
much so.
And that is just such a real win.
It is.
So vulnerability takes on a different level. And I think it's just great enjoyment. We've got to look after ourselves and one another as in maturing love, because I believe if the truth of the scripture is right, he saves the best wine for last.
Hallelujah.
Exactly.
There
That
you go.
should be something. So instead of, we don't avoid the fact that we're getting older or that maybe things don't work quite in the same way. We don't avoid the truth. Just like Abraham, he knew that his body was as good as dead, but at the same time, he believed. I really do believe in the best wine is left for last.
So that's good, but I know from the questions that people asked us, there are couples out there who have drifted, and maybe intimacy has drifted. They've grown apart. What advice would you have to bring them back together as they mature? Maybe over the years they have.
Yes, there's a couple of phrases that I have written down here, and Nigel, I'm going to collectively look at you.
Thank you.
Because you're the oldest, so I'm
Under
sorry.
pressure.
Under pressure.
Oh, Nigel.
Yeah. What I think, we're sort of there. I'm 50 next year, and the sense of, I think you're right. You actually want to be a little bit more outrageous, or you can be a little bit more outrageous, as would be our instinct because we're more comfortable. But we are watching people either become, as we are wired, more outrageous. And I would use the word movement. We want movement. We want movement into the deeper things of God. We want movement into wild spirituality. We want movement into new expressions of physical intimacy. We are wired to not be static. And I think what we see in the questions in 101 different ways it's asked is the concept of I'm in movement and my partner is static. Now, let's take those concepts of movement and static. And sometimes it's faith, sometimes it's bedroom stuff, sometimes it's house move stuff, but it's movement versus the staticness of almost the I have earned the right to do what I want to do by virtue of my age versus the I want to stay in the giving to the Lord and the giving to the generations because God has always got something new. So I'm happy to be in movement. And you do see, even within marriage, the static one and the moving one.
You do.
Yes.
And I suppose in all the areas you've highlighted, there are different ways of that happening, be it work, spirituality, intimacy, any of those things.
Health.
And if one is speaking from experience, one can only speak in the ones you've experience of. And for us, two major things, I would say. One is that I personally have now lived through 3 significant career moves in my life, which has been quite challenging in its own way. So 19 years in corporate life, and at the age of 36, I think it was, making that dramatic step of leaving the cushy insurance company, pension, company car, and management position to go into ministry. And at that time, I said to myself, I remember having this conversation with Louise, I think, saying, I don't want to get to 60 and look back with a comfortable pension and whatever, and go, I knew I should have gone into ministry because it was always in there as a calling.
So I don't want to talk about the church I never planted.
Well, that came a little later, but yes, I don't want to talk about the life that I never lived. So I look back on that change from that. Then we went into ministry. We were we were involved in pastoral ministry for 25 years. Within that, we planted a number of churches with people, but planted our own church. And one of the things that we had to say there was, because we were on our own, we weren't in a denomination, we weren't even in a church planting movement. We set up a company, we set up a charity, and we opened a door one day and said, we're having church. 100 people turned up. But the reality is, I remember us saying to each other, we don't want to talk about the church we never planted. That's part of our journey. There's another memory for us. We talk about that. So then we had 20 something years in pastoral ministry at the head of a church and a national ministry and traveling internationally and all of that. And then post-COVID, we have this dramatic change because I am no longer leading the church, which has its own closure. And Louise is stepping forward quite significantly into public ministry. And so suddenly we're on our 3rd change of life. Now, I get the privilege now of sitting with leaders from all around the world at this stage through the GPA network and talking with them. But I've many colleagues who I was in pastoral ministry with who today haven't got that. They're out of the ministry because they're retiring, but they're missing the cut and thrust of it. So I'm just saying you have these changes in life. I don't know if you have more to say on that,
Well,
Lou.
just I think staying connected. A marriage needs a momentum. So you have to you have to identify what momentum is in your marriage, where it comes from, so that you're feeding on that. And at every time of change or shift, we talked in a previous episode about going with the one that is the most courageous, a courageous choice in a situation. I think getting disconnected is something that you have to, as a value, say, we are going to stay connected, because there will be times where one will be doing one thing, another doing another, and may not be at the same level. that is not a problem as long as you are connected at gut level and feeding that connection with one another. And then that allows freedom. So now I just talked about the different moves that we made. At every point, we weren't, and particularly when the children were young, because of the type of environment we were in, I would have been much more tucked in, but he was more the pioneer and I was tucked in behind him. But at no point did we become disconnected, even though when he traveled internationally, etc., I was keeping the home fires burning, but we made sure not to be disconnected. So if you keep that fundamental connection together, it allows the freedom so that then the problems do not necessarily occur, so you can give wings to each other as long as the roots are deep.
Yes, we're back to the episode number 1, and I think it's really important when we're looking at those who go static versus those who have movement, and we're back to courage versus comfort, static versus movement, and the regret conversations that you do not want to have, although many of us do. I wish we had. And at what point do we go, I have got to get a hold, we have got to get hold of each other and our God, so that our final 25 years on the planet are not I wish I had conversations.
But the wonderful thing about maturing love is we have learnt the importance of that. We value the years that we have. So we're quicker to get to the place of agreement, the place of courage, the place of confidence, the place of stepping out. We're quicker to get there because we know what the odds are and we know what the cost is. And the cost of regret is huge. And we often reflect, I don't think that there's been anything major of major importance that we have regretted.
No.
And that is a glory. Can I tell you, that
but
is
loads
wonderful.
of potential for it. Many nights when we sat, will we, won't we, will we, won't we?
Yeah, will we make that jump or will we not?
And you go for the courageous one. And I'll say this, God has never failed on us. Always.
I'm still struck by the fact that I wonder if you guys are slightly rarer than people who
slightly rarer.
We've wondered about that ourselves, David.
No, like a good indeed you are. That not everyone who gets in touch with us has necessarily, and it may not be the person who has got in touch with us, it may be their spouse, has always embraced the kind of things. And I'm reminded as you talk that an old vicar, the late Reverend David White.
I loved him.
Yeah, he used to share, and I think it was a D.H. Lawrence quote, that it's not familiarity that breeds contempt, as the old phrase goes, but it's the lack of wonder. And that there may be some, whether it's both or one partner in a relationship has lost sight of wonder in each other and maybe in the things of God. And so there becomes a slowing down and a lack of it. And I'm just wondering, what can you do to re-spark the engine and get it going again? What to re-spark that wonder, and whether sometimes it even means that you change your geography, or you change your where you worship, or even you change where you go on. I don't know, something that just breaks a cycle. That if a cycle is in decrease or plateauing, what can you do to re-inject wonder so that people different. Are in the place that you guys are describing? Because I think there'll be some people going, that's great for them, but I feel stuck here. I feel like I'm in a law of diminishing returns year on year.
Well, that's a great point. But we can all do something. And going back to what we said before about memory, grab a memory, but then inject something new into the memory for today.
Right.
So it's like, gosh, we love a holiday. Let's get on a train and let's just go for a day trip. But do something different, adapt, change, be curious, be adventurous, even within a small capacity, you can do that. I mean, they say that, we need to be rewiring our brains all the time. They advise if you clean your teeth with your right hand, every few days change and do it with your left hand. Do something different.
We'll always do that tomorrow morning now,
because
won't we?
what it does, it re-triggers the brain. You're refiring, you're relearning, etc. And the worst thing we can do, I mean, honestly, we all know marriages that have just become boring and they become religious.
Yes.
Because they just keep doing the same thing. And so they get the same result. And then they're sitting of an evening with the curtains closed and the telly on, bored to death.
But we
Don't
do
it.
We do that in worship. I realize,
for sure.
I'm a hand raiser in church. I wasn't always, but I am very much now. But I think, am I making the same actions and the postures as I've done for the last year? Do I need to, like your toothbrush analogy,
different.
God, what way can I praise you now? I don't know.
Watch Power TV on Sunday.
Does
David do something different?
Is there a cartwheel?
Absolutely.
Make a different shape. Yeah.
But we tend to be boring and traditional. Just do something different. It even can just be a small thing, but spark a change.
We hope you were blessed by that clip. And if you want to watch the full episode, head to Power TV today at www.powertv.app. It's our new place where we host all of our content, including prophecy, live broadcasts, teachings, worksheets, and more. Join us as we reveal the voice of God to the nations through life-changing and life-giving words from God. See you there.